I started work as a mailman a few months ago, and just last week I had an extremely bad experience. There's this one house that every time I deliver there, I always see a person watching me through their front window, and I mean every single time too. I had always just chalked this up to maybe an elderly person who had nothing better to do or something. After a while of it happening every single time, it didn't freak me out nearly as much anymore. One day though, I had to finish delivering mail on another carrier's route. They'd had an emergency and had to stop early for some reason. When I was finished with theirs, I had to finish my own as well. As I made it to the particular house where that person would watch me every single day, I saw they were not there at the window this time. This kinda made me happy actually, but it also creeped me out a bit. It meant the person always knew about what time I would normally be there and specifically looked out the window at that exact time to see me. I dropped the mail into their slot and continued on. I still had 3 more houses before I had to return to my truck and grab all the mail for the next street over. When I'd finally finished delivering those letters, I went back to the truck to grab the rest. That's when I saw a weird-looking lady standing under the streetlight right behind it. She looked like she was on drugs or something. Her hair was a complete mess, and she was wearing gray sweat clothes. They were covered with stains all over. She smiled at me with all her missing teeth. She then called out to me, "Hello." I said hello back and started gathering the mail for the next street. I didn't have my eye on her as I did this, but I felt like she was walking up behind me all of a sudden. I turned around, and she was indeed much closer than before, now standing in the center of the street. Do you need something?" She said she didn't. "Okay, well, I'm gonna continue on then. Have a good day." With all the mail ready to go, I closed the back door and made sure everything was locked up. I started walking away. I felt relieved to be walking away from this strange-looking woman. I had delivered to about 6 more houses on the route when I noticed that same woman was now crouching next to a truck in the shadows. She was following me. I was sure of it. It seemed she thought I couldn't see her there. I continued on, but after every single house, I saw she was keeping up with me, obviously trying to hide. Needless to say, this was pretty damn scary. There was nobody else around at this time, and I felt like she might attack me at any moment. I delivered the mail to the final house. Sure enough, when I walked back to the sidewalk, I could see her standing in a shadow by a big tree across the street. I decided I could not continue on like this. I walked over to confront her. She stiffened up as she saw me approaching her. I called out to her, "Why are you following me?" She didn't respond. Instead, what she did made my heart sink. She let out this guttural noise, the kind only a crazy person could make, like she was scared of me or something. She started whooping and hollering, and then she ran away. She was definitely on something. The next day when I came to that house where I would always see somebody watching me through the window, she was there once again. I know it was her that followed me that night. I'm a United States Postal Service carrier. Something very weird and creepy happened to me a few weeks ago on my route. I've been carrying mail for about 4 years now, and have had the same route for about 2 of those. It's a decent area to deliver mail, and I've never really had a problem with it compared to some other bad areas around my city that I've unfortunately had to deliver in the past. But hey, some carriers have to deliver in those shady neighborhoods every single day, so I felt like I got pretty lucky with mine. I always go to this one specific park right in the middle of my route to eat my lunch every single day. There's never really too many people there when I am, but this day there were 2 little girls playing on the playground. This park was a pretty good size, and the playground was surrounded by pathways, beautiful flowers, and even a few fountains as well. The two girls showed up to the playground after I sat down at the picnic area, about 20 minutes before. They were doing their own thing, and I was texting my girlfriend and watching videos on my phone, when out of nowhere, this guy just came up behind me. "You better get out of here, or I'll call the police on you, you damn pervert." I was shocked and literally speechless. I spun around to look at who just said that. It was a huge guy, probably around 300 pounds or so. He was balding and wearing these old-looking glasses. I couldn't even think of what to say before he spoke again. "You get the hell out of here, or I'll beat the hell out of you." My face turned red with fear. "Come on, man, I'm just eating my lunch. I'm not sure what the problem is." The man huffed at me and turned around, then started walking away down the path. I sat there in awe for a few seconds, then looked at my phone to check the time. I still had about 5 minutes left of lunch break. I texted my girlfriend about that huge guy, then looked over to the playground. I saw the two girls now standing at the top of a big wooden slide, and I saw the man below them. He seemed to be talking to them or something. My initial thoughts was that he must have been their parent and got pissed off when he thought I was staring at them, when really I was just eating my lunch. Then, though, I saw him reach up and try to grab one of the girl's ankles. The girl let out a brief scream, and I stood up right away. The man looked around nervously in all directions, trying to see if anyone might have seen him. Well, he must have forgotten that I was still there, or maybe he assumed I had been intimidated and left already. I have no idea what his thoughts were, but I started walking right over to them. After seeing that, I got in real close, and I could see the girls looked absolutely terrified. "Hey, do you guys know this man?" The man turned around and had a very scared but angry look on his face. The girls both told me they had no idea who he was. The man started to speed walk away immediately after. I watched as he began to run out the front gate of the park. I asked the girls if they had a phone and could call someone to come get them. One of the girls did, and called somebody out to take them home. I'm not sure who they called, but I waited there with them until I saw an older woman enter the park. She walked over to us and asked what was happening. I told her everything. She didn't really react like I thought she would, though. She seemed annoyed or something, like actually annoyed at the little girls. She told them to get down and that they were leaving. After the three of them left, I checked my phone again. I was now 35 minutes behind schedule, so I quickly walked out of the park and turned to go down the sidewalk toward my truck. I got my truck unlocked and got inside. I started the engine and started driving a few blocks down that same street when I saw the same man sitting in a small red car. He was glaring at me as I drove by him. I grabbed my phone out and called my boss. I told him everything I saw, and he said he would call the cops for me. The rest of my shift, I thought about that guy. I felt bad for just leaving like that and not doing anything. When I got back to the office, my boss told me he did call the police. They went over to that park. I really hope they caught that guy. I haven't seen him or the girls there since. First, I'd like to start off this story by saying I'm a relatively open-minded individual. I have no issues going to places where I know I would otherwise stand out. But hey, that's what makes it fun. I like to surround myself with people who don't all look and act like me. It keeps things interesting and ensures there's always a new thing for me to try or a new place to visit. You know, I'm kind of a thrill seeker. And because of this, when I found myself going to a gay bar with my friend Eli, I figured all I was in for was a night of fun and partying. That's not exactly what I ended up getting though. I'm currently 29, but this took place around 2017 or so. Back then, I was a mostly careless guy when it came to ensuring my own safety in sketchy situations. I just like to have fun, and if I'm sometimes getting hurt, that's a fair price to pay for a good time. The worst thing that ever happened to me on a wild night out was a broken wrist, but even then I just laughed it off and didn't take it too seriously. My motto's always been, never be afraid of life. Eli picked me up from my apartment in Santa Monica, California, and we started that god-awful drive to West Hollywood and his favorite gay bar. I'm not gay myself, but Eli is, and I figured anywhere he'd like to go had to be a good time. He certainly knew how to party. We found a place to park a few blocks away and started walking toward the bar, both excited for a fun night ahead of us. We had to wait in line for about an hour, but when we finally got inside, it was even better than I had imagined. There were people of all shapes and sizes in the coolest outfits, all dancing with one another. The drinks looked amazing, and everyone was clearly having a good time. I found my way to the dance floor with Eli, and we showed off our horrible moves for everyone to see. The vibe was simply incredible. I asked myself why it had taken me so long to go to a gay bar when they seemed so much fun. I sat down and ordered a beer. As I tried to catch my breath from dancing, an older man in his late 50s sat down next to me. He asked me if it was my first time in a bar like this. I was confused as to how he might know that. He must have picked up on my confusion, because he then said this: "Oh, you know, Eli comes here all the time, and I've never seen you before, so I just kinda assumed." I remember awkwardly laughing, confirming his suspicions. He told me his name was Jeremy, and offered to buy me another beer, which I happily agreed to. He seemed like a nice enough guy who was making a decent effort to try and talk to me. We talked for about 30 minutes when I started to feel lightheaded and dizzy. Figured I must have had too much to drink so far throughout the night. I said my goodbyes to Jeremy and began making my way to the bar to look for Eli to take me home. Except I only managed to take a single step before I started to fall over. Jeremy put his arm around me to hold me up and told me he'd seen Eli had left only 15 minutes before. He could still give me a ride home though, no problem. I started feeling a little worried now, but Jeremy had been nothing but nice to me. I told him that would be great, so long as I could get a hold of Eli first to make sure he was okay and tell him who I was leaving with. Jeremy agreed and began to help me outside, basically having to carry my body. I got more and more numb with each step I took. When we got outside, I realized soon enough I was no longer able to walk, and my speech had become completely slurred. I was even starting to black out. This is when I began to panic. I knew this was not from drinking too much. This was a real problem. I looked over at Jeremy, who now only seemed focused on getting me to his van across the lot. At some point, I remember even feeling my feet skid across the pavement, while Jeremy dragged me across the asphalt. I tried reaching for my phone in my pocket, but when I looked down toward my hand, it wasn't even moving. My thoughts started to become foggy. Then I heard a voice come from behind us. "Hey man, is he okay? He doesn't look too good." I knew I was in trouble when Jeremy replied, "Oh yeah, he's fine. My boyfriend doesn't know how to hold his liquor." I was internally screaming, but no sound would come out of my mouth. I knew if I got into this man's van, I would not be coming back out. Thankfully, whoever this kind savior was didn't give up and offered to call an ambulance since I looked so bad. Of course, Jeremy refused. By then, my savior was attracting a crowd that started to slowly coalesce. They forced Jeremy to lay me down, and then everything went completely black. The next thing I remember is being in the back of an ambulance, with Eli asking me what happened and how I got in such a bad state and still managed to get outside. Apparently, when the ambulance and officers arrived, Jeremy was nowhere to be found. Eli had never left the bar. I genuinely believe the only reason I'm still able to tell this story here and now is because of that unknown man who had the courage to speak up on my behalf. It turns out Jeremy had spiked the beer he ordered for me with Rohypnol, probably the most well-known roofie, and I carelessly accepted it from him. I filed a police report, and this Jeremy, or whatever his name actually was, has never been seen since. I'm scared for all the people out there who might be victimized by his cruelty and lack of human decency. I asked Eli how he even knew him, and he told me Jeremy had only asked his name minutes before taking a seat with me. Everything he did was calculated. and he did it with such ease while acting completely calm too. I haven't let this discourage me from going back to that bar, and I don't want to let it discourage anyone else either. I do want to warn anyone out there who takes their life and safety for granted though. Don't do that. You never know how quickly you can find yourself in a situation where you have no control over what happens to you. Please be careful. I'm in my 30s now, but when I was 11 years old, I had a frightening experience with a mailman. I was at the kitchen table with my mom, and we were making some cookies and brownies. We were mixing things up, and my mom said she didn't have enough eggs for what we were making. She washed her hands quickly and told me she was going to run to the store and be right back. I stayed there at the table, sitting in the wooden chair and watching TV. It was on in the living room next to me. I'm not sure how long after my mom had left, but the mailman appeared at the kitchen door and tried opening it without saying a single word. Thankfully, my mom had locked it. The man tried to speak to me through the door though. "Hey, can you unlock the door? I need to bring this package inside." I felt sick to my stomach. This mailman was a big guy, and he looked real creepy too. I told him he could just leave the package on the porch, but he told me he could not do that. "Oh no, I can't leave this package. It has some expensive things inside. Just open up and I'll be on my way right after." I didn't know what to say. Right after that, my brother had walked into the living room after coming down the stairs. He walked across the room and into the kitchen with me. Then he stopped by the brownie mix and dipped his finger in. He asked me where Mom was. I looked past him to the kitchen door. The man was now gone. I got up and looked outside. I could see he hadn't left the box he was carrying. My brother didn't think anything of this at all, but my mom was a little weirded out when she got home. I saw our mailman a couple days later, and I realized it was not even the same guy. That was something I hadn't noticed in the moment. Something else I never realized at the time, but did when I got older, is how the mailman would even know there was something expensive inside the package to begin with. What would have happened if I had opened the door? I have no idea. Okay, so a little background. This happened around 7 years ago, when I was 13 years old. My mom had just gotten married, maybe 2 years before, to my now stepdad Greg, who also had a daughter. We'll call her Lucy. She was 9 when my mom and Greg got married. We moved into a pretty big neighborhood. It had a pool and various playgrounds, and they were fairly close to the house as well. Because of this, one day, I believe it was a Saturday to be exact, Lucy wanted to go down to the playground to play. I agreed to take her with me. I got my bike and Lucy rode on the handlebars, occasionally getting off and walking beside me. This took us about 10 to 15 minutes to get there. We weren't very far away from the house at all. We got to the playground and I sat down on the swings, while Lucy did whatever she felt like doing, playing in the sand, the jungle gym, etc. During this time, a mail truck pulled up right next to the playground and proceeded to just watch and stare at us. I thought it was pretty weird, but I didn't really pay much attention to it at first. I also didn't recognize the mailman either. The usual mailman was an older guy, very friendly. The guy parked at the playground was a much younger guy. After about 10 minutes of him just staring at us, Lucy came over and spoke to me. "Hey, Emily, why is the mailman just sitting over there?" I told her I didn't know, so how about we ask him? He was only about 50 feet away from us. Lucy yelled over to him, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man responded, "Just watching you." We immediately looked at each other, and I whispered to her, "That's pretty weird." Thinking back on it, the way he said it makes me shiver to this day. It was just extremely creepy. I've always been pretty street smart since I was little, and I didn't like the vibe I was getting from this guy. I decided it was time to leave now. We walked over to my bike, not looking in the guy's direction at all, and started to leave. I was pedaling slowly on my bike while Lucy was walking beside me. After 30 seconds though, I stopped and looked behind me. The mailman was following us. He stopped when I noticed him. This continued maybe about 5 or 6 times. Each time I looked back, I would always give him the rudest looks, and he'd stop following us for just a moment. I told Lucy to hop on my bike handles, and we noped the hell out of there. I pedaled fast enough to turn on this one corner and go up some random person's driveway and hide behind some bushes without him having seen it. The supposed mailman drove past, and after a few minutes, we went back to my house as quickly as possible. I never told my mom what happened. I don't think Lucy was even really frightened that much, to be honest. And that's mostly because she was too young to know what was going on, though. She was also pretty ditzy, so that didn't help much either. Fast forward a couple of months later, there was something on the news or in the newspaper. I can't quite remember exactly. My mom was telling me about some guy in a mail van who attempted to get some girls to get in. It was in my neighborhood. The girls ran home and naturally told their parents. I didn't really think anything of it until the guy was actually found. They showed a picture of him on the news, and guess who it was? That mailman I'd seen that day. I just kind of stared in disbelief. I didn't tell my mom or anyone else. Actually, until right now, I just kind of thought to myself, wow, that's pretty scary. It was pretty scary, but I'd put myself in lots of dangerous situations when I was younger. I guess that's why it didn't really faze me so much until now. I honestly mostly forgot about it too, until a couple of years ago. I'm not sure why that guy had a mail truck or what he was trying to do, but I know he did have one. I'm glad I didn't end up in it that day.